This tutorial is broken into 3 parts. Part 1 is creating a simple bill of materials. Part 2 is creating custom reports that can be appended to the bill of materials or written out separately. And Part 3 is how to report variant information in the bill of materials and in custom reports. So beginning with Part 1, we'll cover how to create a simple bill of materials. I'm going to begin this demonstration in Mozaix, but it's important to understand that this dialog is identical in Mozaix and Pantheon, so it can be used exactly the same way between programs. And I will also show how to share the startup file information between the 2 programs. This information, once it's set up, can be shared on any installation. So to begin, this is the basic Write BOM dialog with the BOM report tab activated. To report a BOM, first select your design and a variant, if there is one, and you want to report the variant information. The BOM report has a header option here. We've created an example header that you can see. For example, if you hit preview down here, this right here is just our sample file, and these 3 lines are the header file. These lines are going to report in every bill of materials regardless, because we need to make sure that the information is trackable. So the idea behind this header is to allow each company to define their own information for each bill of materials. For example, I've created this sample file. It's just a text file. It uses pounds for comments. So back in Mozaix, I can point to that file. So if I were to hit preview again, you can see this is the information I just showed you in the text file, these lines right here. And if you don't want the header, simply turn it off. So to actually create the body of the bill of materials report, you'll see here, these are some default columns. QTY indicates quantity. This is actually default information created by Mozaix. It's not actually a property. Item is the index number, simply where it falls in the list, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Part number is in italics, meaning that it can't be removed from the list. And column names, they can be changed to anything the user wants. It's going to report based on this system information, and the column name can be changed to anything desired. Width is the character width of the actual column. This can be set to a hard width, or fit can be used. Fit will take the longest string in the column and make the column width based on that. Sort by is an option to have one column sorted numerically from top down or alphabetically from top down. Now, many bill of materials also include references. So let's say reference. Now here you see it pops in refdes. This is because the MDB that I read into this session actually had this stored previously. So it knew that the last person who wrote out the MDB wanted their reference column to be refdes. You can see the width is 100. This is usually a pretty long column. And finally, to manipulate more of the format of the report, here are some settings. Starting item number, again, the index number, you can change that. Column spacing is the character width between columns. Merge alternate parts is a next to obsolete option. Just leave it on, or refer to the documentation for more information. Wrap lines with column width will, if we were to look at this, the reference, if I say wrap, it will wrap 100 characters. Otherwise, if going to another database system, for example, turn this wrap off and it will report the references along one long line. Consolidate consecutive references will take, for example, C1, C2, C3 will report as C1-C3. And separate refs, this is an option to report basically your bill of materials by reference designator. It makes for a pretty long report. People do use it. But for our purposes, we'll just do consolidate. These delimiters can be used to go to other systems such as Microsoft Excel. Just be forewarned that if you look at the preview with delimiters, it's not going to be as human readable, but it's showing you an accurate output. The output, most people use the electrical bill of materials output. If you'd like to understand more about mechanical, please refer to the documentation. For here, we're just going to keep it simple. So let's go ahead and preview this bill of materials, and I'll describe a little bit. Here you see the fit settings again working, output by part number consecutively, and here is the consolidate consecutive references, see R38A to R38F. Now additional options, the set to default, if I click this, this is going to return to what you saw at the beginning of the tutorial. What you saw was actually stored in the database, and until I hit OK or store off a setup file, it's not going to remember these settings. So if you get into a mess, go ahead and hit set to default and it'll return you to where you started. Load setup file is actually the ability to load this file right here, which can be stored out or not. This, I'm just going to output the report and I'll explain further. So here I'm going to hit OK. Note that your file name is actually design name, date code, and tab name. We're on the BOM report, so it's outputting the BOM report. So I hit OK. So here you have your output file as viewed in Microsoft Notepad. And here you can see this is just the design folder. Here's the BOM setup that we wrote out. So here you can see all it is a command. This file contains a command that can be copied and pasted into any startup file. Refer to the documentation if you want to know more, but this is basically the unifying factor for a design team. Everybody can output the same bill of materials. So as the final piece of understanding writing a bill of materials, I'm going to show it here in Pantheon. And here you see this is the same dialog we were looking at in Mozaix, and it has a little bit different of a setup just because that's what's stored in the PDB. We can change our header file, and I can load the setup file that we output from Mozaix. Here's my BOM setup, and here you see now we have no header, and everything is set according to what was set in Mozaix. So our preview file is essentially identical except for the date code and its output from a board. So that concludes the basic tutorial on how to write a bill of materials in Mozaix and Pantheon. Moving on to part 2, let's look at how to create custom reports. Continuing where we left off in Pantheon, there are 2 report tabs. Generic Report 1 and Generic Report 2. These tabs are identical and they allow for the setup of 2 different kinds of reports. They're disabled by default, but they can be appended to the bottom of the bill of materials report or reported to a separate file. Report to separate file activates this setting here to specify a file location and file name, and click Write to write it separately from the main bill of materials dialog. For our purposes here, we'll append it to the bill of materials. The format option is it's recommended to use column, but there are some occasions where the row format is useful. I'll show it in demonstration in the variant portion of the tutorial, but for our purposes, we'll do column format here. This is a custom title option. I'm just going to title it a reference part number geom report and set it up according to my title. So this report, when appended to the main bill of materials, you'll see here's the report we're familiar with from part 1 of the tutorial, and here is the appended report. This is the custom title that I gave it, and here are the column titles that I've specified. And if I go to the bottom of the report, here we see 743 references are found. So moving on to generic report 2, let's say I want to append another report, and in this case we're going to report the alternate geometries found in the design. Now this is a good demonstration of why there's this omit entries with missing values option. I'm going to show it. So let's list the references and the alt-geom property. I'll preview again. So scrolling down, we have generic report 1. Scrolling further down, here's generic report 2. I called it alternate geometries, and here you see we have kind of a problem. This report has many empty entries because there aren't very many alternate geometries in the design. So if I return to the bill of materials and I turn on omit entries with missing values, this is going to omit any reference that has a missing value. So if I have several columns here and there's a value in one column but not another, the reference will not report. It has to have a value in every single column. So let's try that preview again. And down here at the bottom here is the alternate geometries report, and now you see it's really only U3A through U3F. And again, if I wanted to report this to a separate file, I would just specify the file name, click Write, and in the background you see it's actually written the report separately from my actual setup for the bill of materials. That concludes part 2 of our tutorial. Moving on to our last section is part 3. Let's learn how to report variant information. So here we are back in Mozaix. Without going too much into detail about variants, I'm going to show in a very simple design just some typical variant scenarios. Here's a variant with some excluded components here. Take note of some of these. Let's say R1, R2. Remember those two component references. And then these capacitors have their part numbers switched to different part numbers. And variant 2 is even simpler. There's just a few excluded components here. So looking back at our display, you can see there are some orange triangles and there are some white diamonds. These are indicating the two variants on the design. So to further this concept, we go to the bill of materials. Now, one especially useful report without a variant selected in the bill of materials is to simply add the variant name. Now, the best way to have this report in a more readable format would be for me to change this to fit, and I'll change the settings to report by the reference. So if I preview this, you can see now I can see every reference that has a variant assigned to it. So even though this is my main design and it's reporting all of the components, in this particular report I can see which components are going to be excluded in variant 1 or variant 2. So that report behind us, I'm going to go ahead and delete this and return it to what it was. We'll do Consolidate again. And now let's say I want to report a bill of materials with a variant active. Now I asked you to remember R1 and R2 from the first variant. The reason being, if I output this report again, R1 and R2 are no longer reported, and that's because they are excluded in variant 1. So now that we have a bill of materials for the standard variant, there's some more information that can be reported. And as I referred to in a previous section, this is where I can demonstrate the row format in a particularly useful way. I'm going to output by row, and this is going to be the excluded components report for variant 1. You can see this is active. And the display excluded, this is specifically for variant information. you can see if I turn this to none, this becomes disabled. That's because this display excluded is a report that is going to see which variant is active and report the excluded components. It's that easy. So in this particular report, all I have to do is say excluded comps for the reference column, and I'm going to get in a row format. This is what I named my row, and these are the references that it found as excluded for variant 1 up here. So lastly, building on the ability to report variant information, I'll move to report 2 as an example. And I want to mention that once a variant is activated here, this changes the list of available columns. What can be seen here is we have excluded comps, and then there are these other options: variant design, variant part number, and variant reference. The variant design means the actual design that the variant component belongs to. The variant part number, this one refers to the part number that it has been changed to in the active variant. We saw that in variant 1 in variant browser at the beginning of this tutorial. And to make it clear that we're looking at something different, I'm going to show the original part number. So since this variant is active, again, that means that some of these capacitors have changed their part number. So now we see a report, the standard bill of materials, our excluded comps report, and then at the very bottom is the next report. This shows which components have variant part numbers. Now, as explained in a previous section, you can see that there are blanks here. If you want to consolidate your report, go back and say omit entries with missing values. That means anything with a missing value will not report. So let's preview it again. So now we see variant 1 shows the new variant part number as opposed to the original part number, which again you can reference up here since we're reporting variant 1. Let's find C6 in the list. Here's C4 to C10, which means they are all part number 182854, which is again referenced here. For more information on how to use variants, I would recommend looking at the documentation. They come highly recommended by many users. So that concludes part 3 of our tutorial, and we thank you for spending the time with us. Stay tuned, more tutorials are always on the way. Join us in celebrating over 30 years of success in EDA. We look forward to hearing from you.